All right, I think we're going to start. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. The weather has been really nice, and it's late in May, so I'm very thankful for that. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. The Arizona Capital Times, of course, covers state politics, the state government, state agencies. And if you don't have a subscription to the Capital Times, hit me up. I'll get you squared away. A lot of people, or many people, would describe the Arizona Capital Times as an independent, nonpartisan, non-ideological newspaper. I kind of like refer to ourselves as an equal harassment newspaper. and again, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to thank our sponsors for engaging with us this way. Without their support, we will be very limited in our ability to host very important discussions like the one we're having today. Valley Metro is the regional public transportation agency that provides a coordinated transit service to residents of Metro Phoenix. From regional bus, light rail, and para-transit service to alternative commuter solutions, Valley Metro's core mission is to develop and operate a network of transit services. The Arizona chapter of the Associated General Contractors of America is Arizona's oldest and most influential not-for-profit association of general contractors, subcontractors, and other construction industry affiliated firms that are engaged in highway, heavy industrial, and municipal utility construction. The Maricopa Association of Governments is a council of governments that serves as the regional planning agency for the Metro Phoenix. MAG is also the regional quality planning agency and the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Transportation for Maricopa County. That includes the Phoenix area, of course, and the neighboring urbanized area in Pinal County, containing the town of Florence and the city of Maricopa. MAG provides regional planning and policy decisions in areas of transportation, air quality, water quality, economic development, and human services. Again, thank you to all our sponsors. We are fortunate to have a powerhouse panel this morning. These gentlemen are very knowledgeable. They're really the experts on transportation in our state. We have Scott Smith. Scott Smith is the CEO of Valley Metro. He is responsible for the operation, design, and construction of an expanding regional transit network in Metro Phoenix. Of course, the Valley Metro system is a partnership of 17 municipalities in Maricopa and, of course, Maricopa County, offering bus, light rail, paratransit, and van pool services to more than 71 million riders annually. Scott was recently named to the American Public Transportation Association Board as a transit at-large director, and he also previously served, as you know, as mayor of Mesa. While mayor of Mesa, he was also president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Scott is the only Arizona mayor to have served in this position. He's a certified public accountant, a lawyer, and CEO of a regional home building and development company. I always say Mayor Smith. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Are you in your office or are you at home?
I am in my office for the first time in a long time. I think there's like three of us on the several floors we take here down in downtown Phoenix, but I've been working mostly from home.
Thank you again. Also joining us this morning is David Martin. David is president of the Arizona chapter of the Associated General Contractors of America. As president, David runs chapter operations, public relations, educational programs, and legislative affairs for the organization. The ACAGC, chartered in 1934, is a not-for-profit association of general contractors, subcontractors, and other construction industry affiliated firms engaged, as I mentioned before, in highway, heavy industrial, and municipal utility construction. David previously served as deputy director of the Arizona Rock Products Association and as policy advisor to the Arizona House of Representatives. David, thank you for joining us this morning.
Luigi, thank you very, very much. And we're really fortunate to be involved in this forum today. But there are others that are out there that are suffering. And it's to those folks that we really need to have our prayers sent out to them and let them know that we're thinking about them. And There are some folks in hospitals today that really need to be prayed for, and those individuals are really the folks on the front lines on this. So I'm fortunate together as a team to be here today, and we're very, very grateful that you could put this forum together. But let's not lose sight of the fact that there are folks out there that are suffering. So.
Thanks for that note, David. You know, when you mentioned that, it's very humbling because we all have jobs and so many others don't. And, you know, this crisis has hammered everybody pretty hard. And yeah, so thank you for joining us, but also thank you for noting that fact that we are amidst a very difficult time. Our final panel member this morning is Eric Anderson. Eric is the Executive Director of the Maricopa Association of Governments. Eric, in fact, is no stranger to MAG, having consulted for MAG in 1983 and served as its transportation director. In that capacity, he planned for the region, including the implementation of Proposition 400, which we will talk about in this forum. His work has focused on regional and urban growth, economic development, and economic impact analysis, as well as the urban form and social impacts of new technology and the implications for regional transportation system. Eric served as interim CEO for Valley Metro prior to Mayor Smith, or I always say Mayor Smith.
Don't worry.
Yeah,
I answered everything.
Yeah, in 2016, Eric served as interim CEO for Valley Metro, and he is a member of the Urban Land Institute Arizona Advisory Board, and also on the board of directors of the Arizona Transit Association. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Very, very nice to be here. You know, picking up on the COVID-19 impacts. One of the programs that MAG operates is the Heat Relief Network, which provides hydration stations throughout the valley for the homeless population. So in this time, we want to make sure that that effort continues through the summer, because you know, as temperatures rise, we really need to make sure that our homeless population is taken care of in this difficult time.
Eric, I noticed that is that the loop? Was it the loop 303 in the background?
I think that's the mini stack. I'm not have to turn around and take a quick look at it, but yes, it's one of ADOT's big freeway interchanges.
So I guess we'll start with the fact that everybody has had to modify their behavior as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I do wonder, I guess I'll ask Scott first, what has been the impact on ridership, for example, on insofar as our transit systems?
Well, as people have stayed at home, our ridership is down significantly. We're running about 57% less, carrying less riders now than we did before the COVID stay at home. And that's pretty consistent across bus and light rail. Our paratransit, which is our dial-a-ride service, is down about 70%. So we have seen a significant decrease in ridership. But through all this, we've tried to maintain our schedule. We've been committed to providing the riders the coverage, the frequency that as much as we could that we had before. And the reason for this is, even though we're down quite a bit, what we found out is those riders who are taking transit tend to be essential workers, our healthcare workers, our sanitation, our service workers, and then a lot of others who can't stay at home. They're on the front lines, as are our workers on the front lines. And so we found one thing during this is that while the number of riders has declined, the urgency and the criticality of the service we provide, I think, has been reemphasized. I've had calls from more than one healthcare CEO in the Valley asking me, begging me almost to please keep our service going, because a large number of their workers and their facilities take public transportation. And I've been so proud of our frontline workers.
So,
in order to continue to provide the level of service that we have. So our down only.
Mayor Smith, I'm sorry, you were cutting in and out there for a second or so. He might be having some. Mayor Smith, you were cutting in and out for a second or so, but you were saying how some hospital CEOs have emphasized to you how important, how critical it is that you keep your transportation services going, because we have health workers, first responders, that rely on your services.
Yes, and I don't know if I was breaking up or what it was, but yeah, we find that that we're carrying a large number of healthcare workers, and I have photos from our system that shows a lot of people in healthcare scrubs riding our system. We know that we have a lot of other critical workers, government workers, and service workers that rely on our system, who tend to sort of fade into the crowd when we have a full train or a full bus, but now they stick out. We see them. We know how essential the services we provide are, and that, I think that's been one of the things that I've appreciated is to realize that transportation is a multimodal. We talked about that a lot. We almost use that as a throwaway phrase, but transportation is really multimodal. People depend upon a complete transportation system. Streets, highways, freeways, and yes, public transportation are all essential to keep our economy moving, but also to keep our most basic critical services in healthcare and other things moving. We need it all.
Let me ask Eric. What about? Well, I can imagine the traffic that we usually encounter on our freeways has been down significantly. So I can imagine that that's, do you have any broad overview of how fewer motorists we have on our roadways?
Yeah, we saw about a 35 to 40% reduction in overall traffic volumes around the system. That's compared, we compare that to the first week in March, which is kind of our baseline, because we weren't in the shutdown phase at that point in time. We've seen that tick up over the last week or so. We're about 78% of normal now. I think as the economy is coming back and as we return, we're going to see those traffic volumes climb. It's interesting because what we've seen here over the last 2 months or so is that telecommuting can work. And I think combined with, a little phenomenon, internet shopping, I think we're going to see a fundamental shift in travel behavior in the future too, which from a planning perspective is really kind of exciting because it takes the pressure off our transportation system and it improves our air quality, as we've seen also.
I want to delve into that in a little bit, but let me ask David. David, how's the construction is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's an essential service. So I'm seeing the construction work whenever I went to last time I went to downtown Phoenix, they were still ongoing. How's the construction scene the last couple of weeks?
Well, Luigi, we were very, very fortunate that the governor did declare construction as an essential service, which is really beneficial to our members. But really, a shout out has to go to our public sector partners in the Arizona Department of Transportation, the County Supervisors Association, the League of Cities and Towns, all of our municipal partners and our county partners that have really held onto the bat here to make sure that we're keeping projects going. A shout out has to also go to the workers out there that are really doing a fantastic job and making sure that they're in a safe environment. They're cooperating. We've received very, very, very almost no complaints from the general public about our workers, and our companies and all the folks that are engaged in continuing to work are doing a really great job in making sure that their workers are safe. So while we haven't really been overly impacted, we've heard of different projects that have stopped and gotten back on the drawing board. My concern isn't the present. My concern is the future. We know that the Department of Transportation reported on Friday that they expect to adjust their plan by, just on HERF revenue alone, $711 million. So that's a trend that we're seeing across the board, that folks may be making some adjustments that could impact us down the road. I call it the second foot dropping. I'm very concerned about that. So we're working hard to make sure that we try to convince Congress to backfill those losses.
You mentioned HERF funding, and how it's going to dip. I mean, it makes sense given our situation. But to our readers who may not be as familiar with HERF funding and how that all plays in ensuring that we have roads that we're able to maintain, for example, can you flesh that out, David?
Yes, more than happy to. HERF stands for the Highway User Revenue Fund. The two primary contributors to the Highway User Revenue Fund are vehicle license taxes and fuel taxes, both used fuel and diesel fuel. Those two funds, those two sources, because of what Eric was talking about as it relates to traffic volume going down, fuel consumption therefore goes down. We're also hearing that auto sales have gone down significantly. So those two alone have a significant impact on the revenues coming into the Highway User Revenue Fund. The other thing that's important to know is the Highway User Revenue Fund tax is static. It's been 18 cents since the early 90s, and it hasn't moved up or down. So right now, as prices of fuel go down, it remains at 18 cents. As price of fuel goes up, it remains at 18 cents. So it's static. There's not a dynamic process on sort of a sales tax type of scenario where it's off of percentage. It's a static 18 cents that hasn't been changed since the early 90s.
Well, and while the taxes remain static, I mean, Eric, you know these numbers. We're driving fewer miles, but also our cars are more fuel efficient. Eric, what's the coverage on revenue we're losing, or not coverage, but the revenue we're losing just because of efficiencies since the tax was established, or last increase in what, 1992, 93?
Well, the last gas tax increase in Arizona was in 1991, actually. And if you look at the improved fuel economy of vehicles, as well as inflation that's occurred since 1991, the new modern automobile is contributing about 70% less in gas tax revenue into that fund than the typical car did in 1991. So tremendously less revenue, yet our population is higher, and obviously costs are higher. And so how we move forward in the future, we really do have to augment our transportation revenues moving forward, no doubt about it.
I want to, if you're just joining us, I want to encourage you to ask questions. So send in your questions via our chat room or via the Q&A room, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. I want to go back real quick to Scott. So everybody has had to modify their behavior. The schools are closed, for example. At Costco, the last time I was there, they have plexiglasses. I was at a bank yesterday, and they also have plexiglasses. And going back to some of our grocery stores, there's one person outside doing nothing else but wiping down those carts. And so, a lot of people are wearing masks, for example. What sorts of measures have you put in place in our transport systems to minimize as much as possible the risk of exposure to COVID-19 for the riders?
Well, thank you. There's no doubt that when you're on a bus or a train, you create a close quarters. We've done multiple things. For example, on our buses, we eliminated front door bus loading, so we could create separation between passengers and our operators. Well, one of the impacts of that is that our fare box is in the front door. So if we put everybody in the back door, we have a difficult time collecting any fares. So of course, our ridership is down, but also our fare revenue is down considerably. We've also put separated and not the passengers from the drivers by putting plastic sheets, and we're working on a temporary barrier and perhaps a permanent plastic barrier that would separate drivers from the riders. We also have put limits on the number of passengers that get on a bus. For example, when the rider number hits about 10 passengers for a bus, the operator will probably move on so we can maintain some social distancing. On the trains, we've done the same thing as far as trying to encourage that social distancing. We don't limit passengers, but we've been able to through the reduction in ridership, and trains are much bigger, done that. We also have engaged in a very, very aggressive cleaning and sanitizing. Our buses are cleaned every day. Our trains are cleaned and sanitized. Our stations are cleaned and sanitized. And then we also have implemented a fogging system where we go through, and with this system, it delivers a fog that actually has residual impact, meaning that it clings to surfaces and continues to sanitize for days or even weeks. So we are cleaning a lot more, wiping down a lot more, and we are providing separation between our passengers and themselves through distancing, and through our passengers and operators. Those things of all, and maintaining our schedules. One of the reasons we want to maintain our schedules is so that we don't have buses and trains that are becoming crowded. We've tried to maintain that service so that we stretch out the ridership to a variety of vehicles, and so far we've been very successful in doing that. Knock on wood, we have been fortunate to have limited impact on our operations. Unlike other systems around the country, we have not had operators or workers who have been affected or impacted as significantly. We've only had a couple of situations where we have someone who's tested for the COVID. Very, very isolated instances. We're so grateful that we've been able to dodge that bullet, because other transit agencies have not been able to dodge that bullet.
So just a quick follow-up on that one. The economy is reopening. People are starting to go out in the streets again, starting to ride again. And as Eric noted earlier, the traffic load seems to be getting back up again. So under that scenario, you'll have more riders. Trains presumably will be more crowded. How do you then, I guess the question is, which measures have you adopted now that are going to continue into the foreseeable future, given the fact that, all the experts seem to be saying that this virus is probably going to be with us for months, if not for a year or so?
That's a great question, and one thing that we're grappling with, because what do we do as riders return? It's not been easy, but we've been able to maintain basic safety measures with the reduced ridership. And as riders come back, can we maintain that? Well, a few of the things we're doing is we're not going to let up on our sanitizing. As a matter of fact, we're going to step it up. We may be cleaning vehicles more often than even daily if the ridership goes up. We will try to maintain social distancing as much as possible. We are strongly encouraging, although not making it mandatory, but strongly encouraging that all of our riders use masks. And then we are working towards some permanent structures, such as barriers that we can install on buses, for example, that will allow us to move back to a more normal front door boarding while maintaining separation between our riders and our operators. So we're watching this. For example, in the last week, speaking of recovery, our paratransit rides are up almost 20%. The interesting thing is that we find that during the depth or the height of the shutdown, however you want to describe it, most of our paratransit rides were for doctor's appointment and for critical needs such as shopping and things like that. We're now finding that with that 20% increase, a lot more people are using paratransit to go back to work or to do other non-critical or non-essential. So we anticipate that happening on our buses and trains. We're just going to play it by ear and see what happens, and hope that people are responsible enough that they wear their masks, they maintain social distancing as much as they can, we will continue to clean aggressively and sanitize all of our equipment and do the best we can to keep separation with our for protection for our drivers.
Let me ask you about revenue. We're seeing a fewer ridership. You mentioned that you're seeing a drop in fares as well. Obviously, a lot of people are not on the roads. That's gonna, they're gonna, at some point they're gonna resume to be on the road. But we have 2 months in which the revenue is gonna drop, in my mind at least, dramatically. And David, I want to ask you this one. You talked about HERF funding. You talked about the fact that the gas tax hasn't been increased for decades. For example, there is a measure. I don't know if there was a measure. There is a measure in the state legislature to increase the gas tax. The last iteration of this measure is to couple it with the tax cut, so that in theory it's revenue neutral, and also in theory it becomes maybe a bit more palatable to conservative legislators. Can you update us? I guess the question is that it always was going to be a tough climb for this proposal, even to just get out of committee. What are the chances of this proposal getting out of the legislature at this point? Is it pretty much dead this year?
Well, clearly, 95% of legislation is dead. So this particular one didn't make it to the floor. We know that the House is moving Senate bills that are non-controversial that were not amended so that they can be sent to the governor. This doesn't meet any of that criteria. So clearly it's dead as it relates to a specific bill. If we come back in a special session, there could be an opportunity to discuss the gas tax. The governor would have to make that in his call, obviously. But for now, it's completely dead. So that doesn't mean that we don't have opportunity in the future. There could be an opportunity in the future. This issue dealing with the federal government and this continued backsliding with our state DOT, our counties and cities might provide some momentum going into either next January or prior to that. But for now, that proposal in this session is dead.
What has been the most challenging part of getting this proposal to move forward? I can imagine, for example, that our legislature, which is still pretty conservative, a lot of members are very wary, outright resistant to the idea of hiking the tax or increasing the tax. But tell us a little bit more why it's been. Let me back up a bit. When it comes to education, for example, we've seen the legislature be more open, be more amenable to raising the tax for education, specifically for K-12. That hasn't really translated to transportation, for example. Why do you think that is?
Well, wait a minute. It's important for you to know that when we put a proposal to the voters, that and we have a plan, that these transportation campaigns win. Okay, and the disconnect really exists between legislators who think that voting for a tax means that they're going to be somehow taken out of office. The facts are that 95% of folks that vote in a legislative process on a tax increase get reelected. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. The biggest disconnect we have is with the conservative Republicans. What I don't understand from the conservative side is everyone knows that you have to maintain your house. Everyone will tell you that it costs money to maintain your house. And we are willing to spend money to maintain our house, right? We have a $20 billion system that ADOT has valued, right? That takes money to maintain. And it's that connection between, okay, we have to maintain it and it takes money to do it. Every single legislator, and I'm sure that Eric and Scott will agree with me on this, every single legislator understands that there's a problem and that we need to solve the problem. They even know that that's a problem in Washington, D.C. The fulcrum comes at the point where, how do we solve it? And when you're talking about money, things get a little bit hinky. So that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is how to solve the problem, and us convincing folks that they will get reelected, that we can defend that position. If we have a good plan, which ADOT does, they have the key commerce corridors. Eric and I have worked together very closely on plans in Maricopa County. Scott and I have worked closely on protecting transit funding. We know that the people of Arizona, when they're given a plan, will vote for it.
This is one thing that I'm, as a Republican and a former elected official, I've never understood about some in our party right now. You talk about spending. Transportation and infrastructure is an investment, and somehow that's become a dirty word among conservatives, and I don't understand it, because of all of government expenditures, the investment in transportation infrastructure is the most measurable as it relates to a return. And every study I've seen shows that for every dollar investment in streets, highways, public transportation, there is a multiple, either 4 to 6 to 7 time return. Real dollars, not fluff money, but real dollars back into the economy. It creates, it drives investment. Republicans historically have been pushers for investment in infrastructure. Abraham Lincoln signed the Transcontinental Railroad Bill. Dwight Eisenhower created the interstate highway system. And for some reason, we've forgotten that investments in transportation drive an economy. Be without the 101? What would the East Valley be without the 202? Scottsdale Air Park was big before the 101. It's exploded since then.
I think Mayor Smith is having.
I like to tell people that the success of an airport in Mesa was really driven by
the 202.
We can just go finish.
I'm wondering how.
I want to finish your sentence for you, Scott.
Yeah. Scott, you're breaking in and out.
Infrastructure are bad.
Yeah.
Because they are real and they have real.
You're funny.
Yeah. Mayor Smith, you're breaking in and out.
Other than that, I have no strong feelings.
You were breaking in and out, so for a minute or so. But David was able to finish some of your sentences. Let me ask Eric. I think part of the problem may be that if you look at Maricopa County, for example, you do have a good transportation system in the sense that it's not as bad as perhaps other parts of the country. Again, I can tell you one of my friends who lives in Ohio. Whenever I call him and he's on the road, he curses every 5 minutes or so because he hits a pothole, and we kind of don't have that problem in Maricopa County. Our transportation system here is pretty brand new compared to other parts of the state, and I do wonder if the fact that we have really a Maricopa County centric legislature, if that weighs into why it's difficult to convince people in the legislature to pass a tax hike, because they look around and they see that our transportation system, at least in Metro Phoenix, so far is solid.
It is. We're really blessed with a good transportation system here. The voters in Maricopa County in 1985 passed the first dedicated sales tax for transportation. I think I was the first one in the country, and that was renewed in 2004 as part of Proposition 400. Mm-hmm. And picking up on Scott's uncompleted sentence anyway, if you look at the economy of Maricopa County, really strong, obviously prior to the COVID-19, this is what big investments in transportation can do for an economy. You can look at what's happened in Maricopa County. You see that and say, what would happen to the rest of the state if we had significantly more funding for the rest of the state too? We've been working on.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Sorry, Eric. Mayor Smith, I think you logged on twice. Oh, there you go. There you go.
I switched to a better connection.
Okay, perfect. All righty. Good. All right.
You get outside of Maricopa County, and there isn't money to do hardly any kind of expansion, and ADOT's running out of money just to maintain the system. So it's really important that we continue to invest in transportation here in Maricopa County. We're in planning for renewal of our dedicated sales tax here in Maricopa County. We're in the middle of that planning right now. And we think the voters will support additional funding for transportation here. In Maricopa County, we built over 200 miles of new freeway here over the last 30 years. But as you know, we've had some really good, we have a young system, but we are going to be moving into a maintenance mode here too. I-17, we have sections of Interstate 17 in Phoenix that were built in the late 50s and need to be rebuilt. We estimate that the price tag on those improvements in I-17 is north of $1 billion. So we have some significant projects yet to do here in Maricopa County. State Route 30 out in the southwest part of the valley. Interstate 10 in the West Valley is carrying a tremendous load. We need some redundant capacity in the Southwest Valley too. And so we have a lot of work to do. We've done a lot. The taxpayers here in Maricopa County have invested over $10 billion in transportation here, and we thank them every day. And you see the benefit of that as you go around our transportation system, both our freeway systems and our public transportation system.
You talk about Prop 400. Of course, it's, it was, as you mentioned, voters passed it in 2004 for 20 years. It's authorized for 20 years. So its expiration date is coming up pretty fast. Let me ask you, what's the plan? Is the plan to go to the legislature and convince them to send this to the ballot? And if so, what work have you done kind of behind the scenes to, at the very least, start that conversation?
Yeah, we have to go through a three-step process for this to end up on the ballot. We're planning to have it in November of 2022 in the general election cycle in 2022. We'll see how that plays out. But we have to first, Maricopa County is the only county in the state of Arizona that does not have authority to go to the ballot on transportation. We actually have to go to the legislature for permission to go to the ballot. So that's our first step. And so we have to convince the legislature that to allow Maricopa County to put something on the ballot in 2022. The next step is we have to convince the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors to actually put the question on the ballot in 2022. And then obviously the big test is with the voters then, and are they willing to continue to invest in transportation here in this region?
So it's based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, it does seem to me that the voters of Maricopa County are in favor of a transportation tax. They've passed it before, and there was an effort. I can't recall exactly. Was it this year? Maybe last year. There was an effort to try and undo parts of it, and the voters, voted it down as well. I may be getting some
overwhelmingly.
Yeah, right. So right. Yeah, there is, the voters of Maricopa County they do see the value of a transportation tax. That seems apparent to me. I think your big hurdle might be in the state legislature, trying to convince a Republican conservative legislature to authorize the county to send this question into the ballot. I wonder if you already have a plan in place in which you can show the legislature, for example, where the money is going to go to.
We're working on that right now. We're in the early phases of it. We did some we call value mapping, fairly major survey work last year to really understand where the voters are in Maricopa County, where the citizens are in Maricopa County relative to transportation. We found that especially people that move here from other states like California, just can't believe how good our transportation system here. And it's not just freeway, but our arterial street system, which is very well laid out. And people find the fact that we have this great street grid system actually provides a sense of contentment or security for them too. It's easy for them to get around, easy for them to get to where they want to go. And so, and they also understand the need to maintain. And this is something else that much as David said, we all understand we have to maintain our house. And if your roof starts to leak, you ought to fix it first. But on transportation, if we have roads that are crumbling, it's too bad, right? Until the road actually disappears because of just disintegration. So once again, we have to put more money in maintenance of our roadways.
Here are some details from the County Supervisors Association about the state of our roads in Arizona. So they noted a 2018 report by the Arizona Association of County Engineers estimating that funding to repair and maintain roadways and bridges in counties over the next 10 years will fall short by $2.2 billion. That's a big number. Statewide, 35% of county maintained roads are rated to be in poor or very poor condition, while only 57% are in fair condition. In Pima County, 60% of county maintained roads are rated in poor condition, and that it will cost $1.65 billion in order to bring county roads to a state of good repair. Counties maintain over 1,000 bridges, and the average of the age of the bridge is 36 years old, and 24% of these bridges are older than 50 years old. I guess there's a real need, especially in the rural areas in Arizona, to put more funding, I guess more specifically into road maintenance. And so those are just some of the issues that I think you'll have to wade through in the next couple of years. At this point, I wanna get to some of our audience questions. Let me see here. Here's one. So while we are in challenging times right now, do you expect growth in the future, and what's your views of what needs are for maintenance? This question is, I guess, for you, David.
Well, I'm really optimistic about the future. I really believe that Governor Ducey has done a great job in bringing people to our community. Our climate alone, I know Eric knows more about this than me because of the great polling he's done with MAG, and our climate is an attractor. Our outdoor living is an attractor. So I'm really optimistic about the future, and I think that things look bright for Maricopa County.
Here's a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good. Optimistic about the future, but we also have to realize we're coming up on a cliff. As you mentioned, Prop 400 expires in 2025. What a lot of people don't realize is that 1/3 of the proceeds from that half-cent sales tax are dedicated toward public transportation. They fund the backbone of a lot of the public transportation we have in this valley. And if that tax expires, not only do we fall further behind on maintenance and we kill new projects, but we also would eliminate a big chunk of our public transportation system. So this is one area, investment in transportation, where the electorate, as you mentioned, and as Dave mentioned, and Eric, is way ahead of leadership. When people are presented with a choice to invest, overwhelmingly, nationwide last year, 90% of transportation issues passed. This is the one place where we have got to recognize that we are where we are because of decisions made 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and we benefit from the system that Eric described. But we also are coming up upon a cliff here in the next 5 years that if we don't act proactively, it could be very, very damaging to our economic future.
Let me ask Eric about that real quick before we go back to our audience questions. What's the alternative? What happens if, let's say, for example, the legislature refuses to authorize sending this to the ballot, or if the county board of supervisors says no, or if the voters rejected it? And what's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is not pretty at all. Once again, our sales tax in Maricopa County generates north of $400 million a year, and as Scott said, 1/3 of that goes into the public transportation system. Some of that's going into bus operations, and so immediately you would have a big reduction in bus operations. We would also see State Route 30, for example, in the southwest part of the valley. There's no way that there's going to be enough money to build big facilities like that and improve what we already have. We expect that Maricopa County and Central Arizona is going to continue to grow fairly significantly. If you look at our economic base, the Taiwanese semiconductor announcement last week, I think, is just an indication. Zoom is going to locate one of their R&D facilities here with 500 software engineers. So if you think about the importance of technology in our future, it certainly has come, really is brought to bear in the situation we are today. It's only going to increase in the future. And so that's going to be a big part of our economic base. We already have a big down payment, if you will, in that sector of the economy. And so I think that's only going to grow. ASU has done a great job in building the engineering program, which is fueling a lot of this economic development here in this region too. And so I think the future here relative to our competitor states, we're in an extremely good position. But if we don't invest in infrastructure, statewide and in this region, then we're going to see exponential growth in congestion, and one of our fundamental economic advantages in terms of our transportation system will be lost. And it's going to be hard to get it back.
Go ahead, David. Yeah, go ahead, David.
But failure is not an option. Okay, if folks want to continue this robust growth, this robust economic development, then the legislature, and I know the governor understands this, but the legislature must step up and must understand that this is the linchpin to the economy. So failure is not an option. Now, we heard a lot of stuff in relation to confining MAG as it relates to creating a plan and trying to put them into silos, right? It's counterintuitive to do that. The adult conversation should be that we allow planners like Eric and his team to determine what's best for the future of Maricopa County, okay? That's going to be a dynamic process. One of the things that I agree with the Free Enterprise Club is the issue dealing with Uber and Lyft and those kinds of things. Yet they're advocating to tie Eric's hands. It's counterintuitive to me. Here's the best case scenario. Give MAG the authority, right? Take unencumbered authority, maybe even to a penny, because other counties right now have that authority. Maricopa
So not
County,
a half cent, full penny.
yes, half cent. Give them that authority and allow the planners to do their job to do what's best for Maricopa County. Allow them to do their job. Don't constrain them into some false paradigm that's ideologically based, because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. So
I think
failure
the
is
best
not an option.
argument,
That's my point.
I think the best argument we can make for a continued investment is the work that has been done since 1985 when Prop 300 passed. I think there's no doubt, and you cannot argue that our investment in transportation in this region has been effective. It's been world-class, and it's also been one of the main drivers, if not the main driver, of the economic boom we have experienced since the late 80s. There's nothing else I can think of that has created that. For example, there are people who hate light rail. What they can't deny is that we have tracked actual real estate investment and cost construction along light rail, and in an area that had virtually no investment for the 20 years prior to light rail, we have over $12 billion in real estate investment in places like downtown Mesa and downtown Phoenix and places that had seen better days. So as Dave said, there is no real alternative. And I think that people realize the success that we've experienced. And I just hope that the political leadership, especially those who for some reason don't want to invest or see investment as a cost rather than investment, just look around them. Look at the freeway that they drove in to the state capitol on. A lot of them, believe it or not, take public transportation, express buses. Those are funded through investments that have been approved by voters, and voters will approve it again.
They just have to have the chance.
Mayor Smith, there's a couple of questions here, I think, specifically for you. One says the security officers at the light rail were not wearing masks, and would having them wear masks, would that do more to encourage similar behavior by passengers and therefore increase confidence in the system's safety?
Well, if they weren't wearing masks just recently, then they weren't following our policy. So
Okay.
I'm glad to know that if they weren't doing that, we'll get the word out, because they're supposed to have masks on now.
Okay.
So I hear that we give them gloves, masks, and that's part of our overall effort.
All right, they're supposed to wear a mask. Okay, light rail, another one. Light rail headways have been reduced to 15 minutes between trains Monday and Saturday. Would it be possible to run more 3-car trains to offset any crowding that might result from decreased frequency?
That's one of the solutions that we might have. Our reduction in headways is not based on reduced ridership, but on labor availability and equipment availability. It takes a lot to get trains out on the track. And while we haven't had any COVID related, we have been, as everyone else we've been struggling with making sure that we have enough maintainers and cleaners in order to keep the equipment on the line. So and that's why we've increased the headways, is to make sure that we have enough trains to put out there to provide the service that we have. But the 3-car trains are one of the options that we're looking at as we move back into more normalized services, and we'll certainly consider that.
Here's another one. Wouldn't now be a good time to eliminate fares and public transportation and support it with public dollars? This would limit a point of contact and also help low-income people.
That's the great question, and something that's being debated around the country. Personally, I think it's counterproductive. Over 20% of our costs are covered by our fares, and that's $50, $60, $70 million a year. So it is a big ask to go free. The other thing is, what we have found out is, as we've not collected fares aggressively, is that our behavior has also gone down. There is something when people pay to get on that helps improve behavior. Can't really say exactly what it is, but we found that security issues and safety issues go up when you do not collect fares. And so we utilize fares both as a safety issue as much as a revenue issue. So that's a policy decision that I won't make. It's made by elected officials. But for right now, we're not looking at eliminating fares. We are looking at expanding programs to allow low income to better access our system, but elimination is not on the table.
Here's a couple questions for Eric. During future Broadway curve construction, the potential for 300,000 additional vehicles on Tempe and Phoenix streets when US 60 and I-10 need to be closed may add unnecessary congestion and pollution to our region. This is the opportunity to encourage bicycling, bus, light rail, carpool, vanpool, public transit. But I guess the overarching question here is that how do you plan to reduce congestion during construction?
A very good question. We're working on that today. Actually, that project, the Broadway Road project or Broadway Curve project, $700 million 3-year construction project to fix that major congestion pinch point we have here in the valley. We're working with all the cities along that line, Phoenix, Tempe, Chandler, Guadalupe, and working with their street departments to coordinate signal timing. For example, we're developing alternative routing. One of the things we did when we developed our freeway project schedule, we wanted to make sure that the South Mountain Freeway was open before Broadway Curve went under construction. We also wanted to make sure the Price Freeway, which is being widened today, that project was completed too before I-10 went under construction. So we wanted to make sure that the major alternative routes to I-10 were free flowing as much as they can be. So that's one thing we've done. We're also looking at an unprecedented outreach effort among the employers along that corridor. That is a major employment corridor for the valley, no doubt about it. And so we're going to be working with them on telecommuting, which we've now have 2 months of pretty good experience with as an alternative work schedules. We're also looking at development of apps that provide real-time information on traffic conditions and suggested alternative routes. And certainly public transportation, alternative modes of transportation are going to be a big player in that too. So we're working hand in hand with Valley Metro today to try to figure out how do we mitigate some of these construction period impacts.
So I guess this is another question I think any one of you can answer. With a significant loss of choice ridership now and possibly for many years, do you think this will lead to a degradation of the already weak political support for transit in the Valley? There are numerous people who feel skittish about transit right now, and especially with other riders not covering.
The premise is completely wrong.
Okay.
The premise is completely wrong. The weak support for transit, okay? If you take a look at what happened in the city of Phoenix on two fronts, Proposition 104, and also on the election that tried to eliminate light rail, right? In one case, it was in the high 50s. In the next case, it was 66%. So the premise of the question is absolutely 100% incorrect. There is support for transit. You can't have a multimodal plan without freeways, without transit, without commuter without rail, those kinds of things. You can't have, it's a multimodal plan, and they're all inexorably linked, period. So the premise of the question is absolutely 100% incorrect.
As I mentioned before, I think there is support among the public for a mass transit system and even for a transportation tax hike. This questioner may be referring to support in the state legislature, which I think we already covered that. Let me get to another question here. Do we expect COVID-19, this pandemic, to impact the timeline for the I-10 West Capitol Light Rail extension? I think this is a question for both Eric and Scott.
Well, I can answer that. It already has affected it in one way because a lot of things have been put on hold. But on the other hand, we, starting next week, are having virtual public meetings on some of the proposals for Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 being light rail from downtown to the Capitol. Phase 2 being the Capitol clear out to 79th Avenue. So I think it will have, it'll have an impact. I'm hoping that that impact is measured in months rather than years. A lot of what will determine that will be the impact on local sales tax revenues and regional sales tax revenues, that and then Prop 400 extension, that all will play into how aggressive we can be in all transportation capital projects in the future. That's the real issue. What's going to be the hit over the next 5 years to Prop 400? Which includes funding for many of these projects. But then, can we extend Prop 400? If we don't extend Prop 400, projects such as Cap I-10 become much more problematic. If we can extend it, then I see that moving along, maybe a little delay, but not a big delay.
So thank you for that, Mayor Smith. So I guess we only have time for one more question. And so here's the one I picked. Is there any consideration of including a slice of funding dedicated to maintenance in any future tax increase? So we have obviously Proposition 400 that's you're planning to put on a ballot in 2022. I guess the question then, if I could just tie it all together, is that are you thinking of a component of either an extension or an expansion of the tax to be dedicated to maintenance? I guess, Eric, if I can, any one of you can answer, but let's start with Eric.
Yeah, certainly. We think that maintenance has to be addressed moving forward in terms of how we maintain the system we have now. One thing that our survey clearly showed is that the public gets it. If we build it, we have to maintain it. And so back in the 1980s, when we did Proposition 300, which resulted in the Loop 101 and Loop 202 construction, the deal was, if you will, was that the region would pay for the capital construction, but the state would maintain. And what we have is this situation now, because the gas tax hasn't changed since 1991, it's still 18 cents a gallon. There's not enough money to maintain what we have. Prop 400 puts about $13 million a year into freeway maintenance now, largely for landscape and litter. But we're projecting moving forward a $7 billion funding deficit just on the highway system here in Maricopa County because of the lack of adequate state funding for these projects. We're in better shape here than the rest of the state of Arizona. But if we don't maintain what we have, we're going to lose this great economic development competitive advantage we have.
So it is part of your, there is a potential for, as you plan for the extension of Prop 400, that maybe a portion of it, a bigger portion of it, is dedicated to maintenance.
Yes, I think that may be the case, although our policymakers are pretty adamant. They think the state should live up to their responsibility, increase the funding for roadway maintenance, highway maintenance throughout the entire state, which certainly would benefit Maricopa County too.
And Luigi, if I could, to get back to what Eric said, I think one of the disconnects and challenges we have is that here in Arizona, because of Prop 400 and because of the regionalization and the localization through city taxes such as Phoenix's T2050, the state, to a large degree, has gotten out of the funding for transportation, maintenance, and construction, you know, that's something that is lost on a lot of policymakers down there, is that they don't vote on funding big projects such as the Broadway curve or the South Mountain Freeway or light rail. Those are all done at the regional and local levels, and there is a disconnect between the realities of how our system is built and maintained and the funding. The state of Arizona is one of only, I think, 2 states where not a single penny of state funding goes to public transportation. Very little funding goes to building and maintaining freeways in Maricopa County, and the rest of the state is suffering too because of not only the gas tax, but the fact that her funds have historically been redirected to cover deficits in the general fund. The state, being straightforward, in many ways has gotten out of transportation funding to a large degree. We have to get that information back and have the state policymakers, the legislature, recognize that we cannot continue as a state without them taking an active role in funding our transportation. We can't continually rely only on region, counties, and cities to make this whole system work. It needs to have a robust state engagement.
So let me end with one question for you all, and just very quickly, what has been a silver lining for you during this pandemic? Let's start with David.
The silver lining in this pandemic have been our first responders that have stepped up, our hospital workers that have stepped up, those grocery store clerks that have stepped up and really been on the leading edge of, you just saw humanity, I guess is my point. And the silver lining is that we have a wonderful group of folks out there that are really dedicated to helping folks.
Scott?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Dave said. I've just been amazed that we have hundreds of people in my shop that we say they're heroes transporting heroes. They show up every day, and even in the worst case, when we didn't know really how bad this was, our drivers, our maintainers, our cleaners continue to show up and provide an essential service that I think we've soon realized what the definition of essential is. And it's not for us people who have the luxury of working from home, telecommuting. It's those people who get up every day and go out and do the basic things that make our lives not only better, but possible. The other thing is that, you know, from a construction standpoint, we've been able to advance and gotten more aggressive in advancing projects because of the lack of traffic. So you'll see a lot of things going on in downtown Phoenix, for example, that we couldn't have done, that we are using Dave's members in our contracting community to increase our activity. So there are a lot of good things going on out there in the midst of this tragedy where people are suffering. There's still a lot of good things going on and a lot of recognition that, you know, maybe we've taken some things for granted.
And finally, Eric, what's the silver lining for you, sir?
Well, shout out to the essential workers out there, as Dave and Scott said, totally just unbelievable challenges they're facing and doing it well, no doubt about it. But the big silver lining that we see from a transportation perspective is demonstration that telecommuting can work and it can be effective. And number of surveys from around the country. Employers who didn't allow telecommuting in the past definitely see it in the future now. Employees who were reluctant to telecommute, perhaps for a variety of reasons, see that it can work too. And so we hope that telecommuting is going to become part of our normal workflow, and that we can increase the number of people telecommuting from, we think prior to COVID-19 was in the 7, 8, 9% range at any one time. If we could double that, tremendous impact, a positive impact on our transportation system.
And for me, the silver lining is the opportunity to spend 24/7 really with my boy. He's 9 years old. I've been homeschooling and then working full time. I've struggled a whole lot, but the joy of having him around every day and having, he would waltz into my Zoom meeting sometimes and give me a kiss or a hug. And that's just been really wonderful. Again, David, Scott, Eric, thank you again for joining the panel. To our sponsors.
And Luigi, one
yes.
last thing,
yes,
if
sir.
I could, speaking of education, go to valleymetro.org. We've created a really nice whiteboard that explains what we're doing during the COVID and that celebrates our frontline workers. Go take a look at it. It's very well done. And I thank you so very much for inviting us to join you today.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Valley Metro, thank you, the Arizona chapter of the Associated General Contractors of America and the Maricopa Association of Governments for sponsoring this morning's discussion. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and bye for now.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.